Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, please find your seats. All right, gang, we're ready to start. Boyd, Ramona. Okay, IT man, are we recording?
Yes, we are.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Nevada Department of Agriculture Board of Directors meeting. Today is Wednesday, March 4th, 2015, and the time is 9:21 a.m. Again, it's good to see everybody here this morning. Why don't we go ahead and start off with the pledge? Flags behind me? Okay. Flint, you can start us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just want to say right off the bat, this is a very, turn your cell phones into the silent mode or off, just in case. But what a nice building for everybody to be in today. We got some fancy technology here, and it makes it really easy for a chairman to direct a meeting. It's hard to say how much public input we're going to have out there today, but for the board members, all you need to do is push your big rectangular button there on your microphone, and I can see the light up on your mic, and that'll indicate to me that you would like the floor. So that way I don't have to, yes, Jim? Our office into the building. Yes, yeah, take a left and follow the hallway to the back there are the restrooms. And the ladies are in the same corridor. So
Thank you.
they did modernize it so you're not in the same place. Yes.
So we thought we were ready to go, but we're still not connected to Vegas.
We're not connected to Vegas?
Can we get Vegas maybe on a conference call so we can move forward?
Why don't we go ahead and take it just since.
This is Damon in Las Vegas. I can see you guys
there
and
he
hear
is.
you guys.
Okay, thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you, my friend.
Thank you, Damon.
All right, Damon. Okay, so right off the bat, let's go ahead and take care of the roll call today. I'll go ahead and start to my right. Paul, if you would start off, we'll do the board in all three communities.
Paul No, representing nursery industry. County.
Tim Defrina, Livestock, Humboldt County.
Ramona Morrison, General Agriculture, Nye County.
David Sticks, Livestock, Lyon County.
Boyd Spratling, Livestock, Elko County.
Charlie Frey, Crops, Churchill County.
Paul Anderson, Washoe County, Petroleum Products.
Brian Nakaguchi, Clark County Pest Control.
Jim Snyder, Row Crops, Lyon County.
And I think the only one we have left, Pete, you're in Elko, right?
Yes, I am. Pete Paris, here from Sheep Industry, Elko
Good to
County.
see you, Pete.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Try to keep that crowd under control that's there sitting around you.
I know, they kind of made it a dark little hole back here for myself.
All right, and so that takes care of all the board, correct? We'll go ahead and start with the staff. Jimmy, why don't you take it and we'll feather our way around this room.
Jim Barbie, Director.
Jerry Conrad.
Dennis Belcourt, Deputy Attorney General.
Are you on, Damon?
Yes, audio went out for a minute. Damon Hernandez, NDA staff.
So anyways, we just take care of that and we'll be good. We'll go ahead with our first item, actually second, is public comment. Does anybody have anything? The board or anybody that wants to talk about something that's not on the agenda, we'll go ahead and cover public comment at the end of the meeting as well. Hearing none, we'll go ahead to the minutes. I hope the board got a copy of the minutes electronically. You had a chance to review them. Anybody have any striking issues that need to be addressed? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'd move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, motion was approved by Mr. Spratling, seconded by Mr. Frey. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimous. All right, right into director's report. Jim? Excuse me, Mr. Barbie.
For the record, Jim Barbie. So if you flip over, you can see the schedule of meetings and different activities and things that we've been engaged with. As you take the opportunity to look at those, I'll go over some things I've been dealing with, and then if you have any questions on these, then I'm more than happy to come back and talk about any of these issues. To start with, we on January, I think 28th, since our last meeting, we had our initial budget presentation to the joint finance committees, and that was a general overview. I'm trying to remember, it all runs together, but I think we probably were about 30 minutes in front of that group, and gave a quick overview of our budget, and then we were sent to our subcommittee hearing meeting that was the next week's, which I believe was February 4th. At that meeting, we presented our biennial report, which you had received a copy of and looked at the last meeting that we had, along with the 2015 ag report, as well as the, and I'm going to get the name wrong, I'll look at Donnell, the commodity foods report, what was food distribution report that had been put together with Donnell's group, along with a bushel and a peck, which was the child nutrition program report as well. So those were all presented in subcommittee. No major issues as we went through those budgets, and I think several of those budgets are probably well on their way to being closed and moving forward with. But our budget was, per the chairman, Senator Gokachia, held up, well, two things. We have a couple of budget bills that still have not come out yet, reflective to the antibiotic bill and the feed registration bill, as well as the school breakfast bill. Those three have not come out or been introduced yet, and so we're watching each day to see when those are going to come out, and then we'll start working those bills, but we haven't as of yet because we haven't seen those bills come out in final draft or final proposal. But in that meeting, probably the biggest thing that came up was the issue of the Las Vegas office. And as you're aware, I hope, based on the stuff that we presented in the past, going into this session, part of our budget had set aside $85,000, roughly, general number, a year for lease space in Las Vegas, which would have, and we toured it at our December meeting, basically we would have moved from our current facility in Las Vegas to the Metro building. That project would have been funded as of July 1, and then probably would have been moving into the building roughly somewhere between January and July of 2016. As that came out of executive budget, that project was reduced to, and I think the original number on it was a $7.5–8 million project in CIP funds, or capital improvement funds. And that project was struck in executive budget, and it was reduced to $280,000 and would have just moved buildings and grounds into a part of that building that would have been temporary, with the idea of they'd be there 5 years and then something else would be done with that property. For us, that created a real problem in that we do not have an operational metrology laboratory in Las Vegas, and our petroleum laboratory is functional and, for lack of a better word, legal, you know, in terms of yeah, but I think that's the key word, barely. I mean, you literally can't have more than 2 people in that laboratory at the same time because there's not physically enough space to move around. And so that's a problem. And so our intent in the new facility was, with the new staff that we've taken on with child nutrition program, or food and nutrition, and with the laboratory needs that we have down there currently, that was going to give us an opportunity to increase the fees that we're taking into metrology, actually fill the metrology position that we have on the books down there, but that we have not filled because we have not had a lab that could be certified in the current facilities, that was going to fix our problem. Well, by being taken out of that project, we were basically left with nowhere to go in terms of addressing those issues. So Senator Goicoechea was aware of our needs down there and our issues down there, and then the review of Buildings and Grounds and Public Works questioned why Buildings and Grounds would be moved into that facility versus Department of Ag, and why there weren't other alternatives looked at. So in conversations that we've had since that budget meeting, both with Public Works and the governor's office, I think where we're at now, and this is not 100%, but I would guess that we're roughly about 95% sure that this is where things are going to go. We had proposed, well, they originally proposed basically a lease back that would level the Metro building and then have a $10 million rebuild on a 25-year lease, which would have put us at roughly, I think the first year was maybe $400,000 in lease costs, and then after 5 years it would have gone, or after 3 years it would have gone to $650,000. Anyway, it was irrelevant because there was no way our budget could take that kind of fiscal hit. So we counter-proposed. Basically what we had proposed 3 years ago is, why don't you just swap buildings with us? Give us the Metro building. Let us use our fee programs to do the renovations, to bring it up to ADA code so that we can move into the facilities. We'll use the consumer equitability fees to build the new labs for consumer equitability, and then Buildings and Grounds can move into our old building where we're currently located, which is all in the same block and same area. So that was well received by the governor's office, in that it'll save some general funds in CIP, because they had roughly $280,000 in CIP funds towards that. So that's taken a tremendous amount of our time since the last meeting that we've had. In that time, we've had Mike Geisinger bidding several different ADA updates in there. To give you a summary, we basically put in 2 weeks ago, I believe, a work program to IFC that was for $198,000 in a cost allocation change, and then we're amending that for an additional $10,000 based on one of the projects that we've gotten what the actual costs are going to be on. And so we're about roughly $200,000 in work program funds that would come out of a cost allocation that would give us authorization as of the second week or first week of April. once IFC approves that change. We have Mike working on all those bids. Major issues are the HVAC system was vandalized while the building was vacated. All the copper was torn out. The roof was damaged in the process of the vandalization. So we are working on putting a claim in with risk management because they will pick up the costs of that repair, but there is a $10,000 deductible that has to be paid on that, so that's where we added those funds in. The building has to be sprinkled because it was built in '78, and a part of the new, obviously, to be up to ADA code, you have to have a sprinkler system, fire suppression in there. It is a wood frame roof, so then you have to sprinkle up and sprinkle down. So we're thinking that that's going to be, and we've got bids out trying to get this all figured out, but roughly $70,000 cost there. We have to connect a larger water main to support those sprinklers. That's going to be another, $5,000 there. We have to make ADA wheelchair approaches on the back for handicap. That's going to be, we're not sure, we're trying to figure that out, but roughly we put in $25,000 for that cost. We have the bathrooms that we're going to ADA upgrade ourselves with the staff and talent that we have in the building. The building itself, in these initial modifications that would happen between April and July 1, are only focused on those things that it takes for us to get into the building. We are not going to have major design changes in the building because that's going to keep it cheaper and more affordable. We'll utilize the current configuration of the building and make that work for us. The good news in doing that is that the large open garage area that you guys saw, rather than that being laboratories, that will become food commodities, dry food storage, which will reduce the costs on that program by roughly $60,000 a year once we're able to get out of that outside lease that we currently have for that program. The labs will be located once we start on those after July 1 in the rear section of the building next to the garage area and headed towards the other end of the building, if you can remember kind of the visual. And the nice thing is we're going to have a very nice boardroom that we're going to put together in that facility on the front side, right as you would come in the front doors of the building. And that's going to be roughly 25 feet by 25 feet, much bigger, nicer, manageable space than we've had. And that, for the most part, that space already exists, so we're not going to have to do a lot of modifications. But we'll be able to move all the staff over, and then we'll have a large block of that area that we'll also keep open for meeting rooms and conference rooms. But then it also gives us capacity for the future. If we have more staff growth or more staff needs, we'll have space for them. So this building, I think, once we get the ADA upgrades, we get in the building, get you the HVAC system back and operational, spray new paint, and hopefully put down some new carpet, make a few modifications construction-wise. It's going to be a building that's going to take care of the agency for quite a bit of time into the future, and so that's positive. One of those other costs is we're having to have the roof redone. It's got a when they tore out the HVAC system when it was vandalized, they actually tore units off of their sitting pedestals, and so we have parts of the roof that were wide open and not even covered. So when you're having rainstorms, so there's some water damage on ceiling tiles and things like that. But again, for us financially, it's going to be a much better choice. If we invest $200,000 on this front side to get into the building, we figure the labs to put them in place in FY16 is going to be roughly another $200,000, which will include, the beams that carry the weights, all that stuff that we don't have in Vegas, a much bigger space and more productive space for the petroleum laboratory, roughly $200,000 in FY16 for that. And then from that point on, it'll be modifications to the building to make it more functional for the agency as we need them, as we move forward, and maintenance of the building. So where we had an $85,000 a year lease put forward, basically that won't exist. We'll have maintenance on the building like we do in the Sparks. We will not have, or should not have, a building depreciation because that building was built in 1978. So it would be pretty hard for me to figure out how we would have some, the value of the building should be depreciated depreciated out for the most part at this point. So it should be similar to whatever we get hit with in Las Vegas. So financially, I think that that was the best move that we could have made. And I think ultimately, even in the 16-17 budget, we'll be better off financially with the way that we're doing this. The consumer equitability 200,000 is largely going to come from staff savings that we've had in FY15. We've had roughly 200,000 in savings because of positions that have been open, people that have left, retired, whatever that may have been, the metrology position that has been on the books and budgeted that we haven't filled. And so it's not even going to make a dent in the reserves for consumer equitability. So it's kind of a win-win-win all the way around. But as you can tell, that's been a tremendous amount of our time the last 4 weeks since we last met. We did have, although we have not had our budget bills introduced that I've mentioned before, and we're waiting on those to come out, AB 77 and AB 79, which when we presented to you guys, I believe back in August, was one bill. When it went to LCB, it was split out into two bills. We presented those bills to the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources, Agriculture, Mining. Two issues were brought forward at that point. One on striking old language that dealt with animals that were quarantined and the state being responsible to reimburse the owners of the animals, and that had never been done previously to our knowledge by the agency, and we didn't know, there's no funds tied to that, so we're not sure where those funds would come from to reimburse an individual. And then our other thing was, how much is a diseased animal worth? You know, reality is probably nothing, obviously. Depending, I mean, it depends on the disease, obviously, as Davey pointed out. Brucellosis versus anthrax are, you know, two entirely different issues. So we worked with Farm Bureau and the Cattlemen's Association and came up with language that was based on a law that was in New Mexico that would replace that old language. Everybody seemed to agree to that. We moved that over to the committee. And then the second piece was we were trying to clarify that for point of sales inspections on, well, anywhere where something is sold, we're supposed to be inspecting on at a minimum, a biannual basis. There's no funding to support that program. We tried to go through regulatory authority between the last biennium to get a fee put in place, and LCB basically came back and said you don't have the authority to have a fee associated with that program. So in the policy fixes in 77 and 79, we proposed, well actually I think it was in 77, we proposed that we would be able to have a fee to do that program. That created some concerns by the Marketing Association and Reno Chamber of Commerce, and there was one other group. But anyway, and I basically put it forward, and then their concern was as we had tested that program over the biennium, there was a very low incident of inaccuracy or issue, and so they felt like we should just do what we're doing now, which is nothing. My concern with that is, as soon as there is an issue and we're not doing the work, we're statutorily responsible to be doing the work, it's going to clearly land on the agency's head. You know, why aren't you doing this work? Well, we're not doing this work because we don't have any fees that could support that work, but that doesn't translate well in the press, so you're still guilty, right? So we're trying to get that cleaned up so we had clear guidance on what the expectation of the agency was in this situation, hence the fee. So they wanted us to put together something that was more complaint driven, and Lynn Hetrick, working with Bart, came up with an alternative. Bart, do you mind coming up and kind of just giving a quick, very quick 411 on what that turned out to be? It's basically where we would go out and do random inspections, and versus being, you know, if it's a complaint driven, we were very concerned that, well, I don't like so-and-so, so I'm gonna file a complaint, and then they're gonna have to pay $700 for this complaint inspection, because it would be an on, you know, per complaint, and it becomes a kind of used as a vendetta tool between businesses. So can you give an update on that real quick? You gotta turn on the mic.
Well, good morning. When Lynn and I took a look at this, we thought the complaint-based scenario was going to be unworkable, because A lot of these fees, as the Retail Association and the Chamber points out, are just minute pennies, and the chances of consumers finding them is pretty low. Although you do see a lot coming out in the Weights and Measures community about price verification and how much they are finding. So what we decided to do was to try to put words in that did not alleviated Jim's concerns about regulatorily having to do this, but leaving the door open for us to do price verification checks. We're still going to, working with within CE, we're working on a lot of efficiencies. So we're going to garner those efficiencies and do some price verification checks, get our data together, because I'm going to anticipate that next go around in 2 years or so, the data is going to show that price verification checks are going to be necessary. And I can give you some comparisons right now. We have 19,000 gas hoses in the state of Nevada, and right now the failure rate on those is less than 1%. That is in line with the price verification. I don't think the public would ever say, let's just go to a complaint-based scenario on gas pumps. But it's more of a educational thing on the price verification. So we're leaving the door open to do the price verification checks, gather our data, and if we have the ability or the desire to revisit this in 2 years, we were going to go revisit it on a fee-based. So any questions on that?
So explain how the funding of this program would work.
On the price verification? The price verification, what we're proposing in the bill is we will do our checks. If we do find a problem, then that becomes a violation. And then we will go ahead and recheck and charge the fee associated with the violation. And those are already in the statutes. It's $25 for a recheck and so on. And the threshold on these price verifications is pretty stringent. On 100 items checked, there could be no more than 2 items that are not in compliant. I would like to also point out, just for educational purposes, that we're looking at multiple things when we do a price verification check. We're looking to see that the price of the item as advertised meets the price at the cash register, but also the size. And one of my inspectors actually had a great find that went to national level, and that is in the realm of shrinkage, where a company is not going to change the price of an item, they're going to change the price of the size of the item. And Campbell Soups had decreased their can size by 1/4 of an ounce, but left the prices the same. And it was through the diligent work and a price verification check by one of the inspectors that found that. We brought that up to the Retail Association and the Chamber, went clear through all the retailers and to Campbell Soups about the shrinkage on that. So that is some of the value that we do find in price verification checks. Does that answer the question, Jim? Anything else? Thank you.
I have one question. Paul No, for the record. How is the program, where does the funds come from to run the program now for all of the inspections, verification?
For price verification, we have no funding for price verification check. And how I'm tackling this with no funding, as when the inspectors go into a grocery store to do a scales check, we will go ahead and do a price verification check at that time.
But I think the issue that concerns me as the director is if we send them to Cabela's, where there's no other scale or no other inspection that we would normally do, that's purely off of those other programs that we're trying to run efficiently and effectively, and so that's what makes it an unfunded. So yeah, grocery stores, yeah, that's a piece of cake. Even pawn shops where they're doing a point of sale, that's a piece of cake. Any of those that have a scale that we're already doing, there's obviously some efficiency garnered. But any of those stores that do not certify scales, that's where we've got a real problem. And so that's where we're really wanting to, the expectation defined, that a real expectation that we can achieve, defined through the law on the agency to do that work.
Any other questions for Bart? Thank you, sir.
So with that, the only other thing I would say is reminder that April 2nd will be the Ag Day at the legislature. This last week we celebrated National FFA week, and I had the opportunity to have the state FFA officers meet with the governor and the superintendent of public schools and do a photo opportunity for them, so that was good stuff, and we got a lot of play off of that. This week is National School Breakfast Week. We had the opportunity on Monday to have, you're gonna tell me the name, Zach Sudfield, who was number 44 for the Wolfpack and is now playing for the New York Jets, come to Trainer Middle School and Veterans Elementary School and talk about the importance of milk and the importance of a healthy breakfast and a healthy school breakfast and their diet. And so we got a little bit of news media play off of that, and all of this week is National School Breakfast, and we have a staff member that's in Las Vegas that's actually doing radio show interviews about school breakfast as well. And then we're basically turning full focus to April 2nd, which will be the Ag Day at the Legislature. That morning will be the Cattlemen's Breakfast, as they normally do in room 3100. We're trying to tie all these things together. We will bring in a tent that will sit in the quad. I'll show you that when we tour the area this afternoon, where we'll have a local restaurant. We'll use local ag products from Nevada to produce a luncheon, basically, where the legislators will come in. We'll have some booths and some activities highlighting agriculture in the state of Nevada, and that'll be basically after the Cattlemen's Breakfast from 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And then after that, we'll have the food and nutrition program with one of their food contractors, who will basically be showing what the food is that they provide for school lunches and school breakfast to be sampled by the legislators. And so it's kind of an all-day tada that we're putting together there, and we've gotten a positive response all the way around so far on that, so much so that we've had to move it outside versus what we did in room 3100 last session. Obviously, all of you guys are invited, and we're hopeful that you could make it and attend that. I think there may be, as I'm hearing, some other ag-driven events around that. I was told that there, and I don't know that this is going to happen, so don't hold me accountable or Congressman Amodei accountable, but I think he may do a town hall in association either the night before or the day of around agriculture and its needs in the state. So it should be a great event. So hopefully you guys can mark that on your calendar, and we can get everybody involved. We're going to try to have some different equipment that represents agriculture on the quad, and so it should be good stuff.
There's going to be some locally raised beef that'll be ready just in time.
We'll direct, it's Hattie's, Grandma Hattie's is the one that's doing the catering to it.
Okay, but I'll have to interview the chef to make sure that they don't screw it up.
Roger that. So with that, all I have to offer, if you would open it up to any questions you may have for me.
Yes, Ramona?
Quick question, Jim. What's the status on the contract for the grazing statistics report?
The short contract, which is and hopefully I'm getting this correct, Tina isn't here to bail me out. I'll let you give the update on the contract, but this is the contract that basically is validating, and keep me straight, is validating that what they're putting on the internet matches what, or no, it's smaller than that. Because this one's like right, but it's like the entry, it's not the full, there's a proposal that there would be a bigger contract that would do data from turn of the century to current. What we're doing to start with is what we have funding for, because that would be something that would have to be down the road and that we'd have to get through the legislature, is like a 10,000. Oh yeah, sorry, come on up, Bill. I think you're up after me anyway. Oh, you're not up, but come on up and address the contract, please. Bail my babble out.
Dale Hansen for the record. With the resource concepts contract, That went out to them yesterday to sign and finalize, so that.
Did anyone else apply for it?
No, nobody else. We put it out for public, for other people to bid on, and nobody else was able to meet the qualifications that we had on that. And so it was Resource Concepts was the only one that could do that. And so basically, like Jim said, it's basically take the old data, make sure it can work with the new data, and then go forward after that if it can, so.
And that will be just 2001 to present day numbers is all that's.
Yeah, whatever was done the last go around, it'll be, try to match up that data with so the old data that was done in the grazing statistics report, or whatever that report is called, take that data and match it up with currently what we are doing as far as collecting that data.
Okay, okay. Is there a contact person at Resource Concepts to talk to?
It's Don Henderson is the contact.
Okay.
I can get you his information
I know him.
later. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Spratley.
Jim, I just was wondering if have there been bill numbers assigned for that antibiotics bill and the feed registration?
No, as I had stated before, those are both budget bills that we still haven't seen, that haven't come out.
So you don't have a number to?
No, I don't even have a number on them yet. I'm watching every day as they introduce the new bills that come out from the legislature. And I just checked this morning the ones that came out last night, and we still haven't got those two bills, and the breakfast bills still have not flown. So, which surprises me. I mean, I got to be honest. I would have thought, because those were submitted back in August, I think. I would have thought those would have been drafted and ready to hit the ground running and would have come out early. But they're also, unless my read is off, it seems to me a lot less bills are coming out. I mean, at this point, this morning, I think we were like 230 assembly bills and just over 200 Senate bills total. And, you know, my memory would lead me to believe that we had, by this time, well over 500 bills in each house at the same time period in 13 and previous sessions to this. So I don't know if drafting, there's issues in staffing there or what the deal is, but it seems like a lot of the bills, it's taken a lot longer for them to come out. I think there were less BDRs in total.
You're going to start hitting some of the deadlines not too far down the road.
Yeah, but the budget bills are excluded from the deadlines because they are budget bills. And so my guess is they're probably focusing on hitting those deadlines with other bills, and then they're going to come back to the mandatory budget bills because they are exempt, as it were, from those requirements.
Any other questions for Mr. Barbie? Okay. Next item in the agenda. Looks like we're going to go to 5A. Is that correct? The Virginia Range Cooperative Agreement between the Nevada Department of Agriculture and Return to Freedom Incorporated concerning estrays. This is for board approval. Mr. Flint Wright, the administrator, will be giving the report. Does everybody have a copy of the agreement in their packet?
Flint Wright for the record. First of all, this has been a collaborative effort by the Department of Agriculture, the Governor's Office, and the advocacy groups from pretty much the day when I came on here in July of 2013. There's a considerable amount of work that's been done to create this. I'll admittedly say that we didn't get everything we wanted, but at the same time, the groups would admittedly tell you that they didn't get everything they wanted. It is a compromise document. I do believe that it does address some of the goals that we have in reducing the numbers out there. Some of them just tend to be more long-term than what we would really prefer. It leans very heavily on a drug called PZP, which is a fertility control measure. And you have to excuse me, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold. But the devil will probably be more in the details as far as the SOPs that will be created from this document on how they'll actually administer that drug and how they will do that. we did have to give in on one issue, and that is that is the feeding of those horses. We just felt that because of the nature of the drug, okay, you have to initial booster shot, then come back and shoot them again with the drug, and then you have to do that every year to that same mare for the rest of her productive life to actually make the drug work. So we had to give in a little bit on the feeding process of those horses, because honestly, I think it was a little disingenuous of us to say, well, no, you can't feed horses, but yes, you can feed the drug or use the drug. Because frankly, I just don't know how you would accomplish that task if you didn't allow them to feed those horses and bring them into a close vicinity so that they could apply that. So, yeah, we gave in on that a little bit. I had a couple of things that are very pertinent in the agreement. You're welcome to ask me any questions you want of it. Number one would be 7.2-1, which was setting the goals for the number of mares in the first year. The groups were very adamant about not setting real restrictive goals. At first, we wanted to go with ranges, 100 to 200 the first year, things of that nature. I said that was not acceptable. We need to have some sort of goal to shoot for. At the same time, I told him, I said, if the first year you only dart 148 or 149, I'm not going to hold you to that. But we want to be shooting for 150 mares, and at the same time, follow up in that following year and ensure that the drug has a 75% success ratio. So you'll notice the next portion of that, 7.22, the objective of these treatments is that at least 75% of the mares treated under the FCMs, and that stands for fertility control measures, do not produce foals in the following year, which would be the next year. Essentially, yes, we want you to do 150 mares the first year. At the same time, we want to follow up coming year that proves to us the drug has adequately controlled the fertility of those mares by at least 75%. So that was critical. Also in the area of public safety, the groups that we're agreeing with are not going to be superseding the power of the Department of Agriculture in the issues of public safety or public nuisance for those horses. And they will also not be superseding our ability to take up those horses as we see fit. We did create kind of a category system. I actually believe that portion of it addresses the issues that we run into out there very well as far as how we address what we consider a threat. Category 1 being urgent. The groups would actually not be involved in that at all. If it's urgent, it's us and public safety, other public safety entities, highway patrol, sheriff's departments, things of that nature. Category 2 being priority, meaning this would identify horses that could be potentially a public safety threat, meaning they're near a roadway, they're being fed close to homes, people are traveling in and around those horses every day. That's what we call priority. That's something we need to work on this week or within the next day or so to identify ways we can eliminate them. Number 3 being the more high level preventative. This is where I see the groups actually having a greater amount of impact. Okay, preventative would take into account those FCMs. It also take into other places where the groups could work with private entities to build fencing projects to prevent horses from coming down into roadways. So this is more, let's worry about the horses for the next month or year, things of that nature. Boyd, it looks like you have a question, but okay. Okay. I think we went round and round for about a month on identifying what roadways we need to try and prevent horses to come onto. We had to agree to essentially curb and gutter and highways. So dirt roads out there in those areas are not going to be considered roads of necessary public safety threats. So if any of you are traveling out there on a dirt road, I recommend that you be careful and not hit a horse. But other than that, basically the rest of it just business of an agreement such as this, reasons why we could cancel it, move forward, things of that nature, good faith clauses, and things. So at that point, I'll take any questions you might have.
Flint?
Yeah.
On Dirt Road, okay. Is there a plan on those category situations? What is there going to be, a yearly review or some
Yes.
type of review that you change those categories? And will that be changed by you guys, and then you'll report that to the contractor?
Yeah, essentially, the groups will have to come in once a year for a yearly review and essentially, basically an audit. Have you shown us everything that you've done out there? Are your SOPs being followed? How many mares did you get fertility controlled this year? And at the same time, we'll be reviewing our timetable for how both of us, NDA and them, are addressing those threats. So if there's a threat that comes in, are we addressing it in a timely manner, passing it on to the appropriate authority? That goes two ways. So that's a two-way street, okay? That goes from us to them and them to us. So it goes both ways.
But what I'm saying is, are the categories updated by the Department of Agriculture only?
Yes.
And so you'll be looking at these horses independently of the contractor, and you'll be notifying that this area over here needs to be a Category 1.
Yes.
And you'll notify them of that.
Yes.
Okay. Second question. Have you sat down and talked about a game plan of when some of these items, or maybe all of them, can't comply with the contract?
A game plan that if they cannot comply with the contract, is that correct? Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah. Are you prepared for how thin are you going to split those hairs that they're not in compliance? Because I mean, when you said that, I'm sitting here thinking of these people. Well, tough. We have to deal with that with the BLM all the time. Those kind of stringent, written in paper guidelines that we know cannot be complied with 100%.
The devil will be in the details, and those will be written in the SOPs, okay? But the goal is for 150 mares, and just like we put on the list there, and we're going to hold them to that amount of mares. But like I said, if they get 149, I'm not going to cancel the contract. But if they come to me and they're short 1 month and they're only at 125, yeah, then we're going to have an issue as far as cancellation of the contract goes.
Okay, and then my last question on the dirt road statement you made. So it's okay to hit them on the highway, don't hit them on the dirt road.
No, that's not exactly what I meant.
Okay,
there,
all right.
Mr.
I'm
Chairman.
just in case there's somebody in the corner over there.
What I'm saying is that as far as the roads go, it's how we identify the threat.
Gotcha.
Okay, for public safety. So all curb and gutter and all highways. Curb and gutters will mostly be around your urban areas, your housing developments, things of that nature. Main streets in Reno, which we have horses that get on there.
Mr. Barbie, then I'll go to Boyd.
Just some general statements at a higher elevation, I think, in terms of looking at this. There's some other things that are happening along the way that are going to influence this issue directly as well. It looks like the Department of Transportation is going to go ahead and finish complete fencing the 50 corridor, which I think is roughly 6 or 9 miles from where you would be coming out of Dayton, go over a couple of those hills where the road is split into a four-way. It's currently fenced. They did that as part of that project. Rather than waiting for the second half of that project to happen to do the rest of the fencing, they're going to go ahead and start fencing, I believe, this summer. And so that will eliminate a lot of the horse pressure on 250, which in my opinion is the most public safety, biggest public safety issue that we currently have. Secondly, with the Tesla project coming online and the construction of USA Parkway that's going to go from I-80 all the way down to 50, we met early on as that project was being developed, and that will be fenced as well. So as that, because I think that's going to be roughly a four-way, 2 lanes each side of the highway will be fenced, and supposedly they're going to have underpasses that will allow animals, wildlife, livestock to move back and forth. I think long-term, there's going to be some issues in the Virginia range simply because of the economics of growth that's going to happen there. With Tesla coming in, there's going to be other large companies, I believe, they're going to come in and populate that area. That's going to be a requirement or a drive for other stores, service lending stores, whether that's fuel stations, grocery stores, restaurants, Ultimately, the largest percentage of that ground is private property. It's going to be, I believe, developed either via the small town communities or the suburbs that are going to be feeding those large corporate companies that are operating in the USA Parkway industrial area. So there's going to be a lot of pressure in those areas that are going to be affecting the feral and stray horses. And I think the timing is right to look at doing something different and give it a shot and see if we can garner some benefit for the agency out of this. And by benefit, I mean Chris Miller's time being spent focused on livestock issues and him focused on the industries that are paying his salary. I'm not sure there's going to be necessarily less hours dealing with the horses. I think that probably in this situation a lot more of those hours are going to be translated to the division administrator versus the enforcement officer on the ground. So I mean, I think there's still some realities of because this is going to be something that isn't going to be a magic bullet that's going to solve all our problems, but Flint's going to have to spend some time really working with these groups to ensure that what's being signed is being adhered to and met. But in the same case, I think a lot of the public safety issues are going to go away because of the fencing, which is going to help. And I think I don't see a tremendous amount of harm in trying to give this an opportunity to succeed and see what it comes out looking like.
Before I go to Boyd, Jim, the one statement you made, I hope you have a chance or have had a chance to convey that the industry has really, I think they need a big pat on the back for being very quiet and allowing this program to go forward, knowing that, you know, there's some stresses in the agency that down the road, the fees issues maybe you have to look at, and that they're being very quiet and allowing this to happen, because I think they have a case if they really wanted to get loud. That means you're done. I have the timer. Yeah. I have the timer set on. Yeah. I even turned the timer down even sooner for the lovely Dawn Rafferty back there, so she has very little time. Yeah. Okay, Boyd?
We had a kind of a refresher last night. We drove from Silver Springs to Carson just after sunset. And there were horses on both sides of the road, and I'm thinking, cars passing me 75, you know, rolling down the road, and I'm thinking, man, you know, this is scary. You know, it really is. There is a public safety issue there. And even though this agreement is going to be tough to fulfill, I mean, I would hate to be a contractor trying to take the steps these people are taking. I got to give them credit for that. They're going to step up and try to do it. With the problems with PZP in itself is not the ideal product to be using for fertility control. It doesn't have the efficacy and obvious, you know, that we would like, and the timing of repeating on an annual basis is a tough situation. But it is an opportunity for cooperation with these groups that have voiced any positive management in the past, for them to step up and say, we're going to come in to the management situation here and try and help. And I think that is a big step from where we've been. And hopefully, you know, if things can work out and we're able to fulfill this contract, I think it could be good for the horses. You know, obviously to get horses down to a number or, you know, hold a cap on them that fits the resource as opposed to having horses thin, dying, those sorts of problems that we all know with resource, you know, management, what the potential is. I think it's something worth trying. I have to agree with the director on that. So with that, I do have one question. What will be their verification on how many horses they've actually treated? Do they have some means, or have they discussed that at all?
Yeah, Flint Wright for the record. If I could find the actual portion of that, I'd point it to you. Boyd, the horses have to be identified individually and have to be able to be traced. That will require photographs, marking identifications, because they're not branded. Most of them aren't branded. Now
Well, if they're darting, they won't be able to do anything except photograph, will they?
What's that again?
I say if they're darting, using a dart system to administer the drug, they won't be able to do anything but a photo identification.
That's correct. That's correct. So it will be photo identification, paperwork trail that goes with it.
Okay.
So, yeah, but no, we've addressed that in here. It's a traceability issue as far as identifying which horses have been darted and which ones have not. So.
Okay. So in the interest of opening discussion on this, we're looking for a action from this board, correct, to approve and go forward with this contract.
Are you ready for a motion?
So it'll open up for discussion, yes,
Okay.
by the board.
All right. Are you done, Mr. Sprouling?
Other than making my motion, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Frey has a comment. We'll just go ahead and make sure we cover all the comments, and then I'll let you make the motion. Charlie?
Okay, it appears that from this contract, Return to Freedom is going to hold the board and Nevada Department of Agriculture harmless. And within the contract, there's only a $1 million insurance policy, which I don't think covers very much in today's world. And I'm concerned, and I don't know how strong Return to Freedom is financially. And they have an escape clause within 30 days. They can escape out of this. And so I'm wondering how comfortable you are with Return to Freedom, because I know they want to do good, but I don't know if they have the resources to do what they're supposed to do within this contract. And I don't know if they'll ever recoup any substantial amount of money, maybe selling the horses like apparently it allows them to do in here. To me, we got to look at both sides, and to me, and any contract we're into, I want to make sure it works for both sides or it doesn't work for either one. And to me, just looking this at outside and reading through it, it doesn't appear that Return to Freedom can accomplish the goals and objectives that are within this contract. And I'd like to get some kind of reassurance that they do have the financial resources and backing, because again, I don't think that $1 million is going to help us at all. Thank you.
I may ask Dennis Belcourt to chime in a little bit on this one. I know that what you're pointing out, and we've had our own heartburn over the issue a little bit. Originally, they argued that they didn't feel they needed to have that much insurance. I said, you got to have a minimum of $1 million or I won't sign it, or I won't advise Jim to sign it. So, for instance, the scope of their needs for insurance, though, is not the whole breadth of the entire range and all the horses, okay? So when we say that they're taking over the management of these horses, they're not taking over the ownership. So if someone's struck out there, strikes a horse on Highway 50, that still falls under the state's self-insurance policies and things of that nature, and our NRS statutes that absolve us of any of that liability, okay? So, Dennis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but so really the insurance policy that we're requiring them to have is mostly for themselves and their cooperators that are actually out there doing the work, darting those mares, things of that nature, driving around in trucks. That's the extent that their insurance policy needs to actually cover, not the whole breadth of it, not all the horses, not the potential accidents that can happen.
Do you feel that's sufficient, though, even on their part, even though it's maybe something that they have done? A horse kicks them, puts them in the hospital for a while.
I feel it's sufficient for the state. Whether or not it's sufficient for them, I think that's a question for them. I required them to have $1 million or we wouldn't sign. But I would tell you that we also have a no claim clause in here. So even if somebody was injured out there, the claim would stop at RTF if those people are working. They can't now bring those claims to the state of Nevada.
We have a hold harmless.
Yeah, hold harmless agreement. So if it's not enough, Charlie, then it's on their head. It's not on us. So
thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions before we have a motion? Tim, did you?
Yeah,
Tim Duffarina for the record.
This is Tim Duffarina for the record. I kind of think that it's time that we let those guys attempt to do something. and, you know, just see what happens. I mean, they've asked for that opportunity, and I would like to see them, you know, see what they can do. And, you know, maybe even, you know, everybody's going to be watching nationally all the way through, and just see what happens. This is their chance to show something. So.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Spratling.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the board recommend to the Director Barbie sign this contract with Return to Freedom.
I second that motion.
Motion was,
Morrison?
thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Spratling, seconded by Ms. Morrison. Any other discussion? All of those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Mr. Frey was a nay?
Yes.
Okay. So we had one nay vote. That was Mr. Frey. Motion passes. Okay. Next item is 5C, the NDA, Nevada Department of Agriculture mission. This is from Mr. Barbie.
I think it would be.
B.
Oh, I'm sorry. B. BDR 46-483, appropriation for cloud seeding. Mike Bowman, Executive Director of the Humboldt River Basin Authority, is here. Hello, Mike.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Glad to have you. Could you turn your mic on there, buddy?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
This is just like the legislature. You know, you guys are just got it together.
And
I moved to pass.
I just found out that
Can we just get on with it?
only 2 mics can be on at one time, so.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much, members of the Board of Agriculture. I'm pleased to be here. My name is Mike Boffman. I am the Executive Director of the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority. I do that on a contract basis. And I appreciate Ramona's comments at the recent SGR1 hearing. That was excellent comments, by the way, and good hearing. But anyways, I am here today to ask your board to consider supporting BDR 4643, which was first brought to the attention of the legislature by the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority during the last session to provide funding for cloud seeding in our state. And during the last session, the River Basin Authority sought funding to restart the cloud seeding program that had been going on up in the Rubies for probably 25 years. And the state used to provide significant funding for cloud seeding throughout different areas of the state from the mid-'80s into the early mid-2000s. And then we hit the recession and that funding came away. And so we are basically asking the state to re-engage in providing funding to help with cloud seeding efforts around our state. And we look at it as a tool in the toolbox for the state to deal with obviously drought conditions and also to enhance runoff and available water supplies for a variety of uses. And so I've got a quick PowerPoint here. How does cloud seeding work? For those of you that are not familiar with cloud seeding, basically it's done, and this is an example of either ground-based or you could do the same approach through aerial application. But it's basically taking silver iodide particles and getting them into the upper atmosphere where you have particles of moisture. And those particles of moisture then attach to the silver iodide particle and they become heavy. And as they freeze, eventually they fall. And it's very simple. And this technology has been in place around the United States and internationally, again, since the late 70s, actually, when it really started to take hold. So it's pretty much proven technology. It's done in a lot of places in our nation. But this is an example. In our state, our storms come predominantly from the west, northwest. We have a lot of north-south trending mountain ranges. In fact, we're the most mountainous state in the Union. And as these weather fronts hit these mountain ranges, you have an uplift. And so the idea is you put these generators on the western slope, typically on the fans, and then as that particles are carried up into the upper atmosphere and they condense over the top of the mountain range where it becomes colder, they fall as snow, and then there's a zone on both sides of the range and over onto the east slope where the snow actually falls. And so this is an example of how that might work, and this shows you a cloud or a ground-based generator in the lower left-hand corner of that slide, putting those particles up in the atmosphere, and then they fall as snow across the mountain range. In addition, you can use aircraft to disperse these silver iodide particles into a storm system. That's typically done in places like the Sierra Nevada Range, where access is difficult and you're looking at a much larger area. It tends to be more expensive to do that type of seeding as well. So these are two forms of ground-based generators. The one on the left is a manually operated generator. I will tell you, this is the system predominantly used in a place like Utah. Utah has over 145 ground-based generators up and down the Wasatch Front. And then the program, or the generator on the left, I'm sorry, that's the reverse. The program on the left is the ground-based generator, manually operated. The one on the right is a automated generator, and this is the technology used predominantly by Desert Research Institute in high inaccessible places to access, where you got to access it by snowcat or snowmobile. It's hard to get to, and so these are automated, and they turn them on and off through microwave signals and telecommunications. So why do we do cloud seeding? So obviously, the idea behind cloud seeding is to provide additional water for agriculture, provides additional water for municipal supplies, and it does provide for increased soil moisture content. Those of you that are in the ag sector, and even the municipalities for that matter, with the drought we have going on right now, if we had a banner year this year, we would probably need 2 or 3 banner years in a row just to catch up, because we are so far behind now, and soil moisture content is so low in many of our areas, and so much bank storage has to occur along these river systems, so much groundwater recharge has to occur, that it would probably take 2 or 3 really, really good years just to get us back to a point where we might say, okay, we're normal, and we're actually out of the drought. Well, this can help, and so even in times of plenty, when we're having a lot of storms, that's a time to seed as well, because you're putting water in the bank, and you're getting that additional runoff and whatnot. And then, obviously, it does provide a benefit for forest and rangeland vegetation, and that does have, obviously, an indirect effect and benefit for wildlife and wildlife habitat. So where is cloud seeding currently done? I'm not going to go through all the details of this, and we all know our geography, and I can't see that far away anyways, but it's pervasive in the West. And so you can see across many states in the West, cloud seeding has been and is currently employed. And I will tell you that it's not just used to make snow. In Nebraska, for example, North Dakota, I should say, and down in California, they are actually producing rain in those areas. They seed clouds in Santa Barbara to actually produce additional rainfall so that they can provide water for their residents in that area. The same is true up in the Dakotas. They don't actually produce snow up there. They're trying to produce additional precipitation for crops. So it is pervasive throughout the West. I don't know if you can see that from where you are, because the light might, oh, you've got it in front of you, some of you. But anyways, this just gives you a sense of costs in some of these places around the West. And in this particular table, you're seeing the cost per acre foot of water produced ranging from, looks like on this slide, a high of $7.91 to as low as, I guess, in Upper Boise River, it looks like, I think that's 44 cents. So there's a wide range there, and I'm going to give you some other numbers more specific to Nevada that we've generated in pursuing this. So what happened is the River Basin Authority had presentations by the Utah Deputy State Engineer and their contractor for their cloud seeding program, who came and talked to us about what they do in Utah. And the 5 counties in the River Basin Authority, and that's Elko, Eureka, Lander, Humboldt, and Pershing counties, they heard during the last session about opportunities to do cloud seeding and came to the conclusion that, we ought to give it a shot. We ought to try and go to the legislature, get some funding to do the rubies, keep that program running. The 5 counties and participation by Newmont generated $69,000 of commitments. And then we went to the legislature asking for about $210,000, and it was a $270,000 annual program. Well, we were still in the recession during the last legislature, and they didn't have funding available to provide us with those resources. So the board has continued to talk about it and decided this time, after hearing from Utah, and in Utah they have a matching fund program. And the state of Utah puts up about $350,000, $400,000 a year, and that then is matched by local parties, and they have this ongoing program. They have funded as much as $600,000 a year in Utah. and created a matching fund in that regard, which is about a $1.2 million program. So we decided, you know, we ought to, rather than just focus on the river basin area and focus on the rubies, we ought to, first of all, look at alternatives in terms of like manual operated generators, which are less expensive. And we ought to look at other stakeholders in the state. We knew that they're seeding clouds, and they continue to seed up in the Tahoe Truckee area. We know that they have seeded in the Walker River Basin, and they had funding for that, and then the funding apparently has gone away from the Bureau Rec. There has been interest by the folks with Southern Nevada Water Authority to perhaps do cloud seeding over in the eastern part of the state to enhance their own surface water and groundwater availability. So what we did is we brought all these stakeholders together. Our board basically said, look, we want to pursue this further before the legislature. We convinced the legislature's Interim Public Lands Committee to request a bill draft. We then worked with a variety of stakeholders, and this lists these stakeholders here, which is hard to see. But it's the Walker River Irrigation District, Truckee-Carson Irrigation District, Truckee Meadows Water Authority, Pershing County Water Conservation District, Carson Water Subconservancy, Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, Southern Nevada Water Authority, Washoe County Regional Water Commission, and the Central Nevada Water Authority. All of these groups met on a series of teleconference calls to talk about whether they thought that there are merits in their respective geographical areas for cloud seeding, and if so, how much did they think their programs ought to cost, or what kind of funding would they need to conduct them? And that helped us kind of get our arms around, well, what should be the scope of this appropriation request we're making to the legislature? And I will tell you that the conclusion of all of that was that based upon proposals that we got from both the Desert Research Institute and a group called I have to jump ahead to the next slide to get it. The North American Weather Consultants. We got two proposals from these groups, and these are not, you know, we didn't issue a request for proposals, but it was just to help us frame costs. And what we came up with was DRI was proposing to seed clouds in the Tahoe Truckee area with 6 generators, the Ruby Mountains with 6 generators, the Owyhee Tuscarora area with 2, Shell Creek 6 generators, Toyabe Range, Walker River Basin. They estimated that from those 27, and these are ground-based automated generators, that they could generate between 82,000 and 131,000 additional acre-feet of surface flow, runoff, if you will. And that would be at a cost ranging from about $7.61 to $12.15 per acre foot, okay? And so if you created a matching fund, and it's a 50-50 matching fund, in effect, you could buy down those costs to roughly, you know, $3.30 or $3.80 per acre foot to $6.07 an acre foot in round numbers. So that was one of the proposals we received. And then also in the Humboldt River Basin, there were a variety of ranges that the 5 counties were interested in looking at seeding as a way to try and distribute the benefits of cloud seeding across that very large geographic area. And I will tell you that in the last go-round when we worked on this proposal up in the Ruby area, there were a lot of concerns by the folks in the middle and lower Humboldt system as to, well, how much of this water has really any chance of making it into the lower basin. And I will tell you that right now, given the drought conditions, if the water commissioner releases water in the Elko County area, there's very little chance of that water making it to the lower system. There's just no head on the river right now, and there's very little bank storage. I mean, it's gone. And so most of that water gets into the system, it just doesn't get very far. So the idea was, well, can we distribute this technology throughout the basin? And so these guys took a look at the various mountain ranges that were out there and came up with this proposal to place basically 50 generators in these different mountain ranges in the Humboldt system. And then the diamonds were included as well because, as many of you may know, the Diamond Valley area in Eureka County is a very critical groundwater management area, a very important agricultural area, but also under great duress because of the significant decline in water levels that have occurred in that groundwater basin. So the idea was to see if this might be a tool that could work there. And these guys think that it could perhaps provide some relief there. So anyways, for 50 generators that would produce about 153,000 acre-feet of water, these guys came up with a rough cost of $312,000 for that program, and it's on average about $3 per acre foot. These are all manually operated generators. The DRI proposal is a higher technology. They are remotely operated. These are manually operated. And so with these kind of numbers then to kind of frame, well, how much would it cost to really, do kind of a statewide program? The group of those stakeholders that I listed came up with $500,000 appropriation request. And that's what's been given back to the Legislative Council Bureau staff. And the bill that's going to come out of for BDR 4643 will be for an appropriation of $500,000, and it's intended to be for each year of the biennium. And it would be a matching program. So it'd be 50-50 matching program, which would produce then $1 million worth of cloud seeding activities in our state if $500,000 worth of local programs were proposed. And as Director Barbie indicated, BDR 4643 as an appropriations bill is exempt. It has not been introduced yet into the session. We haven't seen a draft of it yet. But it is exempt, and it will be dealt with very late in the session, as those kind of appropriation bills are. But it will come out, and it will be asking for an appropriation of $500,000 for each year of the biennium. I guess, in a nutshell, when I ran into Chairman Barbie and Lynn over at the Legislative Building, we had a quick conversation. I said, hey, I would really like the opportunity to present this to the Board of Agriculture and see if the Board of Agriculture would be inclined to support this initiative in terms of the legislation that's pending before the legislature. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Mr. Sprouse?
With the
I'm sorry. Hang on a second. You okay, Paul?
I can wait. I can wait. Being uneducated on the cloud seeding process, how do you measure success, or how do you measure performance?
Yeah, again, for the record, Mike Boffman, Humboldt River Basin Water Authority. So DRI has really been at the forefront of developing technologies to do that. But I think, as most of you are aware, there are snow-tell sites in many of the mountain ranges, and that's really how the NRCS and others determine how much snow has fallen, what we expect the runoff amounts to be. USGS is involved in some cases of that as well. And so basically you are measuring the additional snowfall in these target areas and looking at historical data in terms of how much snow did we get, in previous years without seeding, and then how much snow at these snow-tell sites, and how much snow is falling as a result, during cloud seeding. And they look at that as a difference. And DRI has published numerous journal articles and things of that nature. And the state of Utah, most of the states have adopted similar technologies to measure that. Now, I will admit to you, and the DRI guys will tell you as well, there was clearly uncertainty with those estimates. And the range of estimates that you get from folks doing this in various areas in terms of additional snowfall can be from 5 to 18%, which is a very wide range. And so it has a lot to do with the physiography. It has a lot to do with the storms, as they're coming through. It has a lot to do with the technology you're using. If you're using aircraft, you're getting a distribution of silver iodide over a very specific larger area. If you're using ground-based generators that are automated, you're getting them fired up right away and getting them up into the storm when the atmospheric conditions are ripe for that. And you're shutting them off when it's not ripe for that. When you're using manually operated ground-based generators, the call comes in, somebody's got to go out and physically fire that thing up, and so there is uncertainty. And given that uncertainty, I will tell you our board believes that we need to have as low a cost per acre foot as is technically feasible to be able to handle that uncertainty. That was a long answer, but.
I was just curious on the manual systems. Are you looking for volunteers or local residents to run those manual systems, or agency people?
So in Utah, which is, again, Mike Boffman for the record, great question. In Utah, which is an all manual operated system, it is basically run by volunteers. And they try and here's the other thing. In Utah, they have tried very hard to locate these on private or state land. And they have a bit more state land in Utah than we do, but we're going to get there. They put them on those places because trying to permit locating these on public lands can be cumbersome. And so what they do is they find ranchers or others. Some of these are associated with ski resorts, you know. But basically it's volunteers, folks that have a stake in the outcome, if you will, of having enhanced precipitation. So imagine that you've got a ranch sitting at the base of the Rubies, and you know, you're going to benefit from this if it works. And you agree to have a manually based generator located on your place. Someone would be identified to operate that and commit to fire it up, and there'd probably be an alternate or two. This is the way they do it in Utah. So when the call comes in, you know, that person goes out and fires it up and shuts it down. That helps reduce costs dramatically using that kind of an approach.
And a typical, you know, storm event coming through. And how much actual silver oxide, I mean, maybe in pounds, would roughly be discharged in one event from the manual system?
You have just exceeded my knowledge base. I do not know the answer to that, but I will get you the answer to that question. But it's important in terms of the cost of the program as well, because silver iodide prices fluctuate. And so the amount of silver iodide, and I will get you the answer to that, but if you notice, those generating units are very small. Well, it's gone now. But anyways, if you notice that, remember, they were relatively small. That silver iodide is contained in the base of that unit. And my understanding is, and then there's a large propane tank that sits next to it, because these things is basically propane fired. You have a propane flame that produces a heat plume, and that silver iodine is then released into that heat plume. And that's what starts it up into the atmosphere, and then you have a natural uplift on the west side of these slopes. But as you notice, those are small units, and so that silver iodide is contained within that structure, and that's basically a season's worth of silver iodide in there, is my understanding. I will get you the exact numbers. Yeah, but they're microscopic, and so yeah, right, and it's also compressed, you know, in the tank and things of that nature. So yeah, I'll get you the number though.
Go ahead, Tim.
Tim Duffreen, I was just curious, how much does like one of those automated units, any idea how big an area that would, you know, handle?
So for the Rubies, Mike Boffman again, Humboldt River Basin Water Authority. So for the Rubies, which is a fairly large area, they were looking at 7 automated generators. This is the DRI approach. 7 automated generators distributed along the west slope of the Rubies. And I believe the placement is anywhere from like 3 to 5 miles apart in there. And if you look at the proposal for how many of these we would put in the different ranges, it tends to be in that same range, roughly. Yeah.
Any other questions for Mike? Yes,
Yeah.
Jim Snyder.
Yes, this funding would be available to all basins in the state?
Yes, Mike Boffman, River Basin Authority. So, right, it would be a matching fund. And so let's say that Tumwa, for example, Truckee Meadows Water Authority, they're spending $300,000 a year right now for their program. So conceptually, if this got set up, the money would go to Department of Water Resources. They would handle the program. And they would put out a call for, you know, applications for grants for cloud seeding. Tumwa could then submit an application to conduct a $300,000 cloud seeding program under which they were going to fund $150,000, and $150,000 would come out of the matching fund program. And so any area in the state could do that, and it would be a function of, you know, who the parties were. I will tell you, in Utah, it's conservation districts, it's ski resorts, it's towns, it's cities. I don't think there's any private individuals, you know, that have done this, but it's a kind of a gamut of entities that apply for the funds in Utah.
Is there any issue with, you know, the Truckee, Carson, and Walker basins? A large portion of the basin is in California. Is there any problem with that?
Mike Boffman again. Well, there could be. Again, it's placement of these, but we have experienced, and we've had generators both in the Walker, and we have them currently in the Truckee. And there may be generators left up in the Upper Walker Basin. I don't know that for sure, but they're definitely up in the Truckee Tahoe area up there. And they are land-based automated generators. So you would have to place them, for example, if, I don't know, if you're familiar with the Carson area, Carson Pass, for example, that's the upper watershed for the Carson River, and actually the upper Truckee is up in that area as well. So you would place generators, obviously, in California to seed up in that upper part of that basin up there. And where they would end up putting them would be an issue that they'd have to resolve because they're not there yet. A lot of forest up there. Little bits of private ground here and there, but they would have to be in California. But California, as that map showed, it has extensive seeding programs themselves. And California has gotten very aggressive with cloud seeding because they're in the drought just like we are. And it's pretty widespread over there. So I wouldn't see a problem with doing it other than having to work with the forest.
Mike, two questions. The first one on your map, speaking of the California influence, if you look at the watersheds for the Carson and Truckee, probably about 90% of the seeding is done in the California side, which makes sense, right? Because you're going with the prevailing direction of the storm. How much involvement with California? Because they benefit from the snowpack that's on the Sierra Crest to the west. How much involvement with California have we tried to do?
Well, given that I represent the Humboldt Basin, we don't care about California. No, I'm just... I don't have any experience. Honestly, I do not have any experience with California. I know that...
I sit on the TCID, by the way, so...
Very good, very good. Well, TCID obviously benefits from California water, to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's being done now up there. So, I mean, there's definitely, if you're going to add more generators, which this proposal would anticipate for even the Truckee Tahoe, but you'd add them for the Upper Carson and for the Walker, you definitely have to work with folks in California. But most of the benefit for water, well, that's not even true. I mean, both in the Walker and the Carson, there are upstream users on those decreed systems that are in California. So, we haven't pursued this at all yet, but I would assume that some of those upper basin folks up there that have water rights under those decrees that are in California would probably come to the table at some point with their own resources to help buy down those costs. And that's very important I know in the Carson and the Walker, because a lot of the water that's serving those areas, the decreed users of that are ag. Ag can't afford to pay, $15 an acre foot for this. I don't think, and our guys in the Humboldt, they didn't think that makes a lot of sense at that. But you get it down to $2, $3 an acre foot, given the uncertainty, we can go there.
The second question was, well, first of all, I think the board, and I don't think there's going to be a problem. I think the board should support you in your case, but I'm sure you're a seasoned veteran at going in front of the legislature, but if I'm not an ag guy and I'm looking at all these numbers, and you're going to be in front of a lot of non-ag guys and ladies, that when I looked at your numbers, the amount of water, and then you spread it out of all those basins, and however you would split it up, is a small amount. And I grant you, we just set our water allocation yesterday for TCID, and it's not good. But 5,000 acre feet, okay, 5% of what we did yesterday is a lot. So, I mean, there's a cost benefit, but if I'm a numbers guy looking at that, it's a lot of money for what you get, and then you spread it out all over. I just want you to, you're probably be prepared for that when you go in front of them, that'll be the #1 issue.
And quite honestly, that's why we engaged Tumwa and Southern Nevada Water Authority. Most of our legislators are from urban places, and they don't get agriculture. God bless them, they'd like to figure it out, but they don't have time. And so getting those municipalities to the table, it was very important in getting this tool funded for our state. Now, whether we get it funded or not, I don't know. But it's just something that we think needs to be in the box of options that we have. In your case, most of that water, it generates up in the Sierras, And your area for generating is a little narrow. In the Humboldt, for example, I mean, we've got that whole very long area that we've got to try and figure out how to distribute water in. And it's not a very efficient system. And so that's why we've distributed across all these other mountain ranges. But that's an excellent point. We hope that the folks from the urban areas come to the table and say, hey, we think this is a good idea too. And that'll help.
Ramona Morrison, for the record. I've had a question for a long time, and it's simply, again, because I don't understand how this works. It seems to me that we have, it looks like a downstream problem. If California is aggressively cloud seeding, the waterfall that gets over the Sierra is probably limited by that. Am I missing something here?
The short answer to that is the scientists, and again, DRI has been at the forefront of a lot of the science on this, but not just at DRI, but in other states, they have determined that, in fact, cloud seeding does not impair the moisture as it moves across the state into these other ranges and whatnot. Now, again, if Commissioner Member Spratling was to say, well, so how did they do that? What methodology did they use? I couldn't answer that, but I could get him the answer. But the short answer is no. They've determined that it does not have effect, and there are benefits as you move across these states or these regions, these different mountain ranges, to continue seeding. And that's the very first question that our board asked as well, is, you know, are we robbing Peter to pay Paul here?
Do you foresee you going into the legislative hearings? Well, have you seen this book?
I have not.
You need to get a copy.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to go in that much detail, but I carry this with me all the time, and it's very interesting. I got this from the department. I think we all did at our last board meeting. This is very interesting, Mike, and I know, I'm sure you've heard the statistic, but you know, agriculture is number 3 and 4 right around there in the state right now. And the numbers in here, you may be able to show that there's a cost benefit of the amount of money that they're going to do, that'll return in the ag. Like I say, 5% to us in that valley on the Truckee Carson could be significant for producing a crop. Any other questions for Mike? Yes. Yes, Mr. No.
Paul No, for the record. Two things. The $500,000 request, was that for the biannual or for both years, or is that $500,000 per year?
Mike Boffman again. Our hope and our desire intent is $500,000 per year. We are trying to institutionalize this. And so the initial request would be for $500,000 for each year of the biennium, and get the programs up and running. And then if it's working and functioning, would be to try and institutionalize it like it was for over 20 years in our state, where the state year in and year out put funding into cloud seeding.
The second thing, I think that it would be very important, like we discussed before, if a lot of this science was presented at your presentation to the legislature, because if I was not involved in agriculture, that's one of the first things I would ask is, what's the proof that we get anything returned on this investment? I mean, you have to have some kind of science backing you up as far as and I'm sure that there are statistics that could back it up that, you know, as you say, there is a certain spread in that percentage of increase water that's produced by cloud seeding, but the legislature is going to want to know some facts, and I just think that those have to be part of the presentation in order to get anybody to recognize it.
Mike Boffman, that's an excellent recommendation, and we would anticipate having the folks from DRI present at the hearings, and they participated with us during the last session, and they are able to answer those questions way better than I. So,
thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, we should wrap this up. What's the board's pleasure? Go ahead,
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend, I move that the board recommend to the department back, or the board itself backs this BDR.
Ramona Morrison, for the record, I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Spratling, the motion. The second, Ms. Morrison. Any more discussion? All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Have any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Mike. Okay, now we go to the NDA mission. Mr. Barbie.
Well, I appreciate your vote on that last issue, because I was going to note I'm starting to think my lucky rabbit's foot is not working, because it continues to be dry and it just hasn't produced anything. So good thing to support, I think. So our next, one other topic I forgot to make you aware of, and I was hoping to do it before Bart got out of here because I'm going to be in trouble with him for sure. It's also National Weights and Measures Week. I forgot to promote that. I did promote it on Facebook, but I forgot to mention that, so Bart's going to be waiting for me in the parking lot and work me over good. But it is National Weights and Measures Week, and the important work that they do is being recognized across the nation, and I believe we had the governor put out a proclamation as such. With that, our next topic is the Department of Agriculture mission statement. Again, with the forming of the new programs that have come into the agency since the last session, we've been working on and working with and through the staff on developing a new mission statement, and we have that in front of you. We made a clerical last time and didn't have it with the rest of them that we passed. So the rest of them kind of address what each one of the divisions does specifically, and we tried to make this one more general, higher elevation, so that it represents the overall agency, that being the Nevada Department of Agriculture promotes a business climate that is fair, economically viable, and encourages a sustainable environment that serves to protect food, fiber, and human health and safety through effective service and education. And so we're hoping that you will approve that mission statement this morning. I think we're still in the morning.
Thank you. I would love to grant that, but I need okay from our Deputy Attorney General. It's not for an action item. It's information only.
That would be my mistake. So there's our mission.
We would be glad to entertain it at the next meeting. Or you can call a special one. We just love getting together.
We love those,
with
exactly.
all of you.
The corner of the tent on Ag Day, maybe.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, come on, you guys in the back. We wouldn't have to come for that. All right, Mr. Frey, did you have something?
Well, I was just going to make a comment. You know, I agree with the what has been written here. What my concern is the keyword sustainable. And if you take a look at the majority of the farmers, they're elderly, getting up there in age, and of course they divide the property up. These are people with really healthy balance sheets. If you take a look at their income statement and compare their return on investment, they make very little investment. And what is happening to our farmers in Nevada, and it really concerns me because 3 of the adjoining farmers that adjoin us, we share contiguous property. One of them is a ex-state senator, and I don't want to reveal the name, but he basically lost and was kicked off of his farm by his sister. And here's what's happening in the state of Nevada, and you can't really blame either one, but the person, the sibling that ends up with the farm cannot make it because of the return on investment. And you got to factor in the estate taxes or gift taxes also. So they've got this huge equity asset with very little return on investment. Again, the kids that don't get the maybe work on the farm, they want a better return on their investment. So I guess my whole concern is trying to educate the farmers in Nevada to keep the unit together so it's a largeness, sustainable acreage, so whoever decides to stay on that farm can continue buying equipment for that many acres, because it's an economic unit that's basically sustainable. But when you factor in the death in the family, and then they divide all this property up, factor in the estate taxes, you basically eliminate or farming. And farming goes away because no one can survive with less acres and the same amount of equipment, basically. So what has happened in my case, there's two neighbors that have sold, or actually died, gave half to the son, half to the daughter sold, now the son has half, and he can't even afford to retain his own equipment. It all boils back down to return on investment, because there's such a huge capital outlay for the land and the water rights and everything. So I don't know how we address this. Again, I agree 100% with what's written, but that's a serious problem that I see. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Ramona Morrison, if we're going to bring this up in the next meeting, I have a question with regard to where the language sustainable environment came from.
Jim, and I'll just add, Jim, before you comment, I'll just add to that, and I don't want to nitpick anything because I like the statement, but in the ag business, us as producers, the word sustainable scares the hell out of us. Because right now we're dealing with federal agencies that are telling us we want a sustainable public lands out there, but they're not defining it. Okay, is that sustainable without cattle on it? We want a sustainable habitat for the birds, those kind of things. So it needs to be defined. It's used very loosely.
Well,
Ramona Morrison for the record. Sorry, Jim.
Well, I was just going to respond to that. I think that because it's you're sustainable and the agency's sustainable, that we would get to define it. I mean, I think that would be the point.
Perfect.
In other words, through our actions at the agency and through our actions representing the Board of Agriculture. Does that make sense? And then, and sorry, in terms of where the statement came from, this was put together during our all-staff meeting, and then our public relations people basically working and wordsmithing the final document to get something that was straightforward, clean, and represented the overall mission of the agency with all the diversity of programs that fall underneath that umbrella.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Just to add to that, Jim, I'm very concerned about that language because it's a little bit of a legal hook to Agenda 21. And I think it would read better just to say economically viable and serves to protect food, fiber, human health and safety through effective service and education. Just eliminating it altogether.
Here's my counter concern in that, is that if we do not address the environment and we do not define how we interact with the word environment or the environment itself, I think others do that for us. And I think that that's being done heavily by other groups, whether that's wildlife groups or, we have a positive impact on, and we regulate environmental controls. The example of that would be the EPA program, where we monitor the groundwater wells for pesticide residue. That's done by the agency. That's an environmental action that we do through a cooperative with the EPA. And I think we need to, personally, for political reasons, when we're dealing with the legislature or dealing with others, we need to reinforce that we have a role that affects that. I also think that that translates, whether it's good grazing practices that are done, that we define what those good grazing practices are, we being department through the Board of Agriculture, versus other folks that are maybe not so helpful defining what those positive or negative environmental impacts. In other words, a void of addressing the environment, I think, in our mission allows other people to address how they would assume we address the environment.
Ramona Morrison, for the record, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with that word. I think you can talk about good stewardship, management, et cetera, et cetera. We do it every day in business. We are probably the best defenders of the environment out there. So I don't have a problem with addressing it, but the word sustainable does have some implications that I don't think that we want to adopt as a board.
Charlie?
Okay, I like the word sustainable, and the reason I like it is because when other groups come in, they say, I want to sustain the wild horses, I want to sustain wildlife. Well, we, on the other hand, want to sustain agriculture. And so I think that's a very, very important term that our outsiders use, and when we come in with any kind of decisions being made, well, we want to sustain agriculture just as bad as you want to sustain the horses. That's my thought, and that's why I think it ought to be kept in there. Thank you.
Well, remember that my point was exactly what Jim said. We need to define it. And the problem that we run into on our side is it's not being defined and it's left loose. If we can be one of those agencies that finally defines sustainable, I think you're right, Jim. That puts us a block ahead of the agencies that we're dealing with, and I'm fine with it too. We just need to define it, and I think that's where we're headed.
Well, and I think that that's something, you know, as we've been progressing over the last few years in collecting the information that the Board of Agriculture creates and putting out reports that haven't been done previously by the Department of Agriculture representing the board in our policy documents that we're now, you know, creating, representing the board's statements, opinions, positions. I think that's some place that the board could define exactly what they would define sustainable environment and sustainable agriculture. And to Ramona on her comments, understand mine was directed more at the word environment versus
Right.
the word sustainable.
Jim, I understand that. And again, when you look at the Agenda 21 documents, and I don't want to get into the weeds on this, that word, and words have meanings in law. That word sustainable has very strong implications. I think there's a lot of ways to say what Charlie's saying and what we're saying without that word.
For no action item.
Yeah. Well, I think
that's what comes back.
I think we're giving input, so. We'll see this again? You gonna have us for final approval, Jim? Okay. All right, next item is a board update from Dale Hansen. Dale?
Dale Hansen for the record, fiscal administrator. I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna talk about everything that's in the report, but I'm gonna.
Please don't.
Hit some highlights on here. I'd like to just talk about the upcoming IFC meeting that's in April and some of the work programs that we have there going on. The first thing is we're moving a position from budget account 4552, which is typically our grants budget for our plants program. And we're moving that into budget account 4545. And this is mostly due to the original funding for this position. We were told that they were cutting back on administrative cost towards this grant. And so we were moving that position into budget account 4545 to do more work on the organics program and to kind of boost up that program. We've talked about the renovations for the Las Vegas Metro building. So we hope that that gets all passed. We have a contract for the food distribution report that actually was approved in the last board meeting, last BOE meeting in February, that we just need to actually pay these people. So we're going to do that. And then we have the $45,000 contract for the automated pesticide registration system, which we've been able to implement and be able to get, we've gotten a lot of traction on that. And in respect to that, we're going to kind of use that model to go ahead and amend the contract that we have for the brand inspection program, the same contractor, and we're going to do the brand recording program, because that's a pretty simple process, and we want to look at automating that. And this work that they did with the automated pesticide registration system, which is a pretty straightforward system, we feel like they can pretty much transfer that over to the brand recording system and make that all automated. So that's all good. And then we have, it does. It does. If you look at some of these processes, and I think Jim's talked about them before, we've used a lot of manual labor. They're pretty manual intensive. And for example, I went up to the Elko office, and we talked about the volume of paperwork that they have to do. And so we're with the brand recording thing. I mean, that's, if we can get 90% of the people moved over to registering online and so forth, that would cut away 4,000 pieces of paper that these guys have to process through the summer to get that all done. So we are looking at savings there, with especially the administration processing and those types of things. And I think with the, at least with the first year with the automated pesticide registration system, that cut down that process by a lot. We actually were able to count most of the revenue by the end of January, when typically we're waiting till March and April and May to count all of that money. So we are looking at savings in those processes. And then the last two things that we have out there is we have meal pattern grant funding, which has to do with the National School Lunch Program and getting kids to eat healthier meals. And this is actually a grant where we're actually mandated to actually spend this money. So we've been refining this spending plan with Jerry and Donnell's staff, and so we were able to present that in this IFC. And then the other one has to do with just increased participation in the school breakfast program, which has been a big issue. And then, of course, their reimbursement rates increased at the same time that our participation increased, so we're just trying to catch up with those estimates. And then other than that, I'm going to go to talk about some of the, I'm not going to really go into the contracts too much. We are working on some of our processes. As you know, we didn't really have too many policies and procedures for many of our processes. And it's interesting, Charlie asked those questions. Flint, we are working on our sub-grant process and contract process, and Damon can tell you with our audit processes, looking at a lot of these people that we give money to and looking at their fiscal viability up front and requesting that type of information up front. So with our sub-grant process, we worked with the weed management group, and so they're required to show us their financial resources, and we make evaluations on those things. In some cases, we may ask them to actually get a bond if we don't feel like they're very strong. And so those types of things that we are looking at in our sub-grant process. And we're doing the same thing with Donnell's group. We're looking at different ways for cost allocating the money that we sub-grant out and so forth. So we are looking at ways to strengthen those types of things. Coming your way, the next board meeting is we'll have a travel policy. And for state employees, that was one policy that I had to be more democratic about because it affects everybody. So we took comments on that. We wanted to get it to this meeting, but we're still revising that policy. And then we'll have a sub-grant policy, and then we'll have our A133 audit policy, which is basically when we go out and look at these groups that we give over $500,000 in federal funds to, we look at how they manage their shops fiscally, and we look at their performance as well as far as delivering the services. And then we'll have a fleet management policy as well. And that is actually tied to, we have auditors in our house. We always have auditors in our house. So from the governor's office, for actually the Department of Administration, their internal auditors, they're looking at our grants and contracts management process and our fleet management process. So we're going to kind of tie that policy to whatever they come out with as far as recommendations. And just some kudos to just on the FY16-17 budget. I don't know if you guys watch those budget hearings or whatever. I mean, they ask for every question they ask in that meeting. Behind the scenes, there's at least 10 questions for each question that they ask in those things. So we've actually received probably through this whole process, it's like 400, 500 questions about the budget. So if anyone ever doubts that this is not vetted heavily, it is vetted heavily. I want to thank division administrators and my staff, because we received, after our last budget meeting, we received at least 100 and 120 questions that we've been busy. Takes up a lot of time to answer those questions, so we've been busy on that. So, and then lastly, I'd like to thank Damon and his crew. Damon's pretty much over our A133 audits and our dairy audits. And when we took over the dairy program, they were not keeping up on their audits. They were probably 30% of them were ever completed, and he's now gotten that up to 95%. So give him kudos there. Yeah.
Ramona Morrison for the record. And do we have any of the audits completed, or are they in process?
Oh, our audits? You mean the ones that we're conducting?
Brand inspection and dairy and grants and contract.
The brand inspection one has been completed. We actually had to go in front of the governor and the other elected officials and talk about that one. I don't think we've ever talked about it here. We can actually send you a copy of it and the findings and our response to it.
Okay.
We could do that.
And what was the general outcome of it?
If you want to.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that, and I'll have Flint pick up anything that I forget and miss, I think one of the big things that they identified, which we did not agree with, is basically creating a contract system for brand inspectors versus what we currently have, which is a salary and a reimbursement system. And for us, we felt like that would really eliminate our capacity for getting brand inspectors, because it's dang near community service currently. And then if you put it into a contract situation in order to reduce the costs by reducing the amount that each one of the brand inspectors would be making, there really would be, there's no incentive for anyone to want to do brand inspection. So that's a struggling point, and I think that's an ongoing struggling point that the agencies had historically with audit. I don't think this is the first time that they've come up with that suggestion. In general, I think it was very positive in terms of the online system and some of the checks and balances that come with that online system, and that was well received. And I'll leave the rest up to Flint.
Flint Wright for the record. Jim touched the major points. Let me go into the couple of things that they brought up is that we should have greater controls over our accounting system as far as how brand inspections come in and then how they are processed. That's being done through the online brand inspection system. We added a few things here and there. So that's the one thing Jim didn't hit on. Ultimately, overall, the audit was excellent. Really was. Other than the one contract thing, we really didn't have any negative aspects to it whatsoever.
Ramona Morrison, I appreciate that. I know that's such an unwieldy program. That's why I asked the question. Thank you.
Understood. Anything else?
Any more questions? Mr. Frey.
I have one. Dale, could you explain why we have two different accounts? One's called weed abatement and the other one's called plant disease. Now, is that true?
Dale Hanson for the record. Yeah, and I don't, the one for the weed abatement actually had to do with a specific bill. I'm not really sure about the history of that bill, but I'll let Jim answer that.
Just quickly, that was a bill that was actually introduced, if I'm not mistaken, by Lynn Hetrick, who's currently our deputy director when he was at the legislature. And that was for lack of a better description, an impound account, roughly $100,000, where basically abatement work could be done in weed areas so that we could fund those abatement projects by a county, and then the county would go after the individual through their taxes to get that fund returned, that cost returned, and then that money would be restored to that weed abatement account. So it was basically a revolving account, a set aside, similar to the Ag Youth Loan Grant that we have. And so that's a set aside account, where the other account is an actual executive, which that is not an executive account, I don't believe.
Yeah, Dale Hanson for the record. The weed abatement account does not have to go through the legislative process. It's a non-executive budget. And then the other one, the one that you're talking about with the noxious weeds in it, that actually was named that way because we actually had a federal grant that we still have that dealing with noxious weeds and doing that type of work.
Okay, Dale, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and finish up with, where's Robert? Is somebody else going to report for Robert? Bob?
So we're trying to keep things rolling so that we can get out of here by noon, and you do have some other action items.
And I had a request, Jim. As soon as we finish this up, we're going to take a short.
Okay.
Especially since it's just before Don's report. We always do that.
So if you look at that we basically provided his report in writing. I would note that, yes, thank you. It is the whole group, the communications team's report. And Bob, in the past, obviously, as our lead PIO, has presented that information. You can see there in bullet form, it kind of outlines some of the activities that the team has been working with. But I would note that Bob Conrad has submitted his letter of resignation, and today is his last day, and he's feverishly working on a video that we want to get done before the Ag Day. That's kind of an ag industry overview that we'll unveil at the Ag Day activity and event. But we've really appreciated the hard work that Bob's given us in the last couple of years that he's been on the team. He's leaving to pursue his private business in PR and public relations, and we're very excited for him, and we hope that that goes well. And his position has just, I believe, been released, the advertisement for that position, and we're hoping that we can have that position filled very soon, because we want to get that person on board to help us before the Ag Day, because we have so many activities that are coming up. But we do wish Bob the best of luck in the future, and I appreciate the hard work that he's given us the last couple of years. But we were hoping that you guys could review that, and we could keep moving on with the agenda. We would take any questions, though, to Jerry, as Jerry oversees that entire group.
Any questions for Jerry? Well, we'll just add that position to Jerry's. Yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, she's looking for more things to do, I'm sure. Okay, we'll go ahead and take about a 5-minute break, use the restroom, fill the coffee. We'll be right back. 5 minute and 30 second. Okay, we're back on record, and we're going to move to item 6, plant industry. Don Rafferty, you have it, 6A. And just real quick, approval request for the following expenditures in the Nevada Alfalfa Seed Council. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Don Rafferty. My first agenda item is to request an expenditure from budget account 4544, which is the Nevada Alfalfa Seed Council. We're requesting two expenditures, one of $5,000, which is a donation and maintaining membership status, and an additional $5,000, which is to support research regarding the lygus insect management in alfalfa seed production. If you have in more detailed questions on that, I do have our seed program manager, Russ Wilhelm, here with me.
Any questions on that, this item? I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Snyder?
I move we approve that transfer.
I second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Snyder, seconded by Mr. No. Any more discussion? Mr. Frey.
In the Nevada Seed Council's minutes, they donated or made a motion to donate $5,000 to Dr. Walsh. And then is our next one where we're going to go make another donation for $5,000, or is this it?
Sorry. The first $5,000 request goes to the Alfalfa Seed Foundation, Alliance. The second one is to Mr. Walsh. Is to Mr. Walsh for his research. So there's two. No. That's okay.
Next question, Mr. Spratling, did you have a question?
No, just a comment. It just seemed like, most of, been involved with a lot of trade associations and their dues. $5,000 is pretty steep for that, but I guess if that's what it is, that's what it is.
For the record, Don Rafferty, it's a tiered, and that the Seed Council decides how much they want to give. For instance, 2 years ago, they agreed to donate $20,000, so it's in support of the mission of the Alliance.
Great, thank you. Any more questions for Ms. Rafferty? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All of those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimous. For the board update, in the light of time, everybody had Don's report in their packet. Do you have any questions? If not, we will move on. Any questions? Hearing none, thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Next item, consumer equitability. Bart O'Toole. Oh, Bart's gone. Same thing. We had a report on our agenda. Does anybody have any questions that the director might be able to answer? Hearing none. Food and nutrition. This is a board update by Donnell Barton. Is Donnell going to give us one? Same thing, right?
Same thing.
Okay, anybody have any questions? The update was in your file. Hearing none? We're going to move on. Thank you, Donnell. Glad you came down. Animal industry. We have a board update by Flint. That'll be the same thing. If anybody has any questions on the board update, please let me know. We'll cover it on the minutes. But we're going to go ahead and go to number B, which is an action item, 9B. It's a permission to go to workshop and hearing on proposed trichomoniasis retests of bulls. Hold order, administration. Mr. Wright, presenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Flint Wright for the record. We have a number of these, and to be honest with you, my update is actually these changes. These are what we've been working on these recent. So it's for the efforts of time. Totally understand to skip over the update, get to it. The first portion of it is proposed change on the trichomoniasis retest of bulls in a hold order. Above the actual NAC, you will find our explanation of why this needs to happen. Under number 2, under the hold order administration. Essentially, in a nutshell, What we currently do is when we have a contact herd on that, we put those bulls under hold order until they're retested, and if they come up negative, great. If they come up positive, then those bulls have to enter a slaughter channel. What we do not have, and then what this NAC change is meant to do, is essentially a hammer to go with that, understand? Because currently, we have a certain number of producers who just constantly stay on hold order, okay? Because it doesn't really preclude them to do any kind of real business, understand? Because under hold order, you can still ship your calves, and as long as your cows and your bulls are going through a slaughter channel, then you're fine, and business goes on as usual. So what we constantly have is these same names showing up on our list with trick, okay? Because they never completely get themselves cleaned out. And so then at the same time, those same herds then infect neighboring herds, and the issue never just seems to come to rest. And so what this essentially does is that with the change, which is on 2A, so for every test-eligible bull, you would have them tested within 6 months, okay? Currently, we're asking them to do it within 12 months. Now, if you don't do it within 6 months, by changing this one small word in there, then you actually fall under a quarantine order, okay? Now, there's some exceptions to that rule that we would allow, but that would be based off of the quarantine officer, which is Jim Barbie's discretion. We feel, as a department, that this gives us, as I said, a bit of a hammer to go with it so that we can actually force some of these producers to finally clean up their herds and get to a non-infected status and therefore stop infecting neighboring herds. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Flint? Mr. Spratling has something.
There's some grammatical things that obviously would have to be changed before you go to
yes.
But I have some problems. Under number 2, hold order administration, and then the second bullet point thereof, where we'll have, it would also apply to owners of positive herds who have 30 days to sell their positive bulls. I think we need to have that in their provisions to go beyond that.
Okay.
I think we should start out right at 60 days because the most common vaccines that are given to bulls at the time they're tested would be a 6-day withdrawal. So I think we need right off the bat to have at least a 60-day window to sell that bull to go to slaughter without violating some sort of withdrawal time on a vaccine and or medication. So that's one recommendation I would make, before going to the workshop with it. Then going down to under where it says NAC 571.658, under number 2, where you're actually talking about a 6-month period of time to go from hold order into a quarantine situation. I know there was a lot of discussion at the board meeting for the Nevada Cattlemen's Association on this, and there were a lot of people who had concerns that should be a shorter period of time. As a veterinarian and knowing the logistics of making some of this stuff happen, I think it needs to be a couple of months longer than that. I would wholeheartedly recommend that to be at 8 months as opposed to 6. And just an example, the prime example I see happen time and time and time again is that someone will test their bulls right before everybody else is turning out or after they have turned out. They come up with a positive, therefore all the neighboring herds are now put under hold order. You've already got your bulls out into big country, you've turned out. You don't want to have to go out there and start stirring that herd up and pull bulls in the middle of the breeding season and risk, say he comes up clean, you've now removed 10 days in the middle of his breeding season that you pulled the bulls out of his cows in order to get the test done, get the results back and whatnot. So I really believe that, and some of those ranches, have turned out, fairly early with their bulls. They may have gone in May sometime, maybe even earlier than that, depending on if it's a more of a desert operation. I think, and they won't be coming in until maybe the 1st of November. I think we need to have an 8-month, instead of a 6-month, I really think it has to be at 8, somewhere, in between those two now. And I know I'll catch a lot of flack when I go home and have made this recommendation with other members of the cattlemen's. But I think as a veterinarian, and I think Dr. Yokichiya would agree with me, that the logistics of making this happen, a lot of people will regret having pushed the 6-month if they fall into their own trap of not being able to get those bulls out in a 6-month period of time or get them tested. So that's my recommendation, you know, to the board, that maybe perhaps that should also be changed. And one last thing is I think we have to have some provision within this regulation that deals with removing a current trick tag in order to put a new trick tag and perhaps disguise the identity of that bull to be retested and perhaps come up negative. As it now reads, it says if a bull is negative on his last test, then basically he's off the hook. It doesn't say whether it was an inconclusive to start with or if it were a true positive or whatever. You know, and unfortunately, we've had that situation already arise, and I think we really need to have some provision to deal with that, removing that current valid tag and reinserting something to disguise the identity of that bull.
Mr. Barbie?
For clarification, so if we had so that I'm understanding, if we had a bull that tested positive and was placed with a trick tag, right?
Correct.
So isn't it still, and maybe this is directed at Flynn as well, if a bull comes up positive, we're supposed to put a brand by NAC on that bull, correct? And wouldn't that eliminate the tag issue?
Finding that exact language in NAC has been difficult. I actually tend to agree with Dr. Rink on the issue that we discussed at Cattleman's, that it's in NRS, that never found its way to the edits of NAC.
Then if that's the case, NRS is more specific than NAC and is more, so if we start imposing that NRS as required, that would eliminate the tag issue, or am I not understanding?
I think we have to have some provision that there's a penalty for confusing the identity of a bull once that tag is put in. That's my only concern, is that we don't lose track of that potentially positive or inconclusive bull. A new tag is put in, therefore clouding the identity of that bull and getting retested, being negative, and on they go.
But do I understand right, though, if we're gonna put a tag in the ear by NRS, if that's the case, we should be branding that bull.
But sometimes there's that lag time between getting positive results sent off, sample sent off, getting results
Testing
back,
performed versus testing results.
and then getting the bull in to put that iron on them. There's a lag time, so and those are just, looking over this, I think would improve. While we're messing with NAC on trick, I think we should take care of all those issues.
And basically, if the board, as a group, deems that necessary, you would approve these with Dr. Spratling's recommendation.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I have 3 items here that I'm going to ask that the motion be made to include. One of them is the 6-day withdrawal language. I'm just going to roughly touch this. 60, I'm sorry. See, that's why I want you guys to go back if you have to in the minutes to get the exact.
Yeah.
That item, the next one is 8 month instead of 6 month. And the next one is stiffer requirements on tag removal, if I'm hearing right.
Or clouding or something of identification of an individual bull.
Maintaining the traceability of the bulls that are tested positive.
Sounds perfect. Do any of our non-ag folks, anything here that you guys would like to, because I'm always interested to make sure the petroleum, that I understand it, and do you understand exactly what's happening here?
Paul Anderson for the record. The part I do clearly understand is it's going to workshop to hearing. So you're going to be getting all the stakeholders that have an interest in it will be there. If by chance I care, I could be there as well. And likewise, I would like to invite you all to consumer equitability meetings.
Well, I just wanted all you guys to understand that we vetted this through the Nevada Cattlemen's Association. And, I want you guys, it'd be kind of neat for you to sit in some of our meetings, but this item right here is one that's very controversial. It's not mandated like brucellosis is. It's a volunteer program, and we have this split right down the middle on making it mandatory or not. But the program we have so far has worked well. And what this does is helps, we're just trying not to get our state into trouble where we can't export our cattle out of state to another state. That's basically what we're trying to do.
Actually, then, I do have one question. Your workshops and hearings would all be one, right? You're not going to be doing individual?
Yeah, Flint Wright for the record. Yes, it would be all one, just for the sake of trying to get things moved along at a quicker pace.
Ramona, yes.
But to clarify that statement, technically, each one of those would be a separate change, which will require us to open a hearing, close a hearing, open a hearing, so that you understand. And then the last thing I would add, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, but basically right now LCB won't accept language because of the session going on, and so the language that they would actually be in that document will probably not happen until after the session in June, so that we do this once and it becomes permanent versus using this language that has been unflushed by LCB and it becomes a temporary reg, and then we have to repeat the whole process again. So just in terms of staffing needs and times. I know cattlemen's would rather us do it sooner than later.
No, I think it's acceptable, understanding that, what you've just described, I think it's acceptable to most of the industry that I've talked to wait till after the session.
Okay. Ms. Morrison, are you prepared for a motion? I see you on the trigger.
I'm on the trigger.
You got it.
I so move as outlined by Boyd Spratling and Dave Sticks.
Including the additions?
Including the additions.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Ms. Morrison, seconded by Mr. Spratling. Any more discussion on this item? Anything from the audience? Hearing none. All of those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimous. Item C is permission to go to hearing and workshop on brucellosis calf foot vaccination regulations. Again, Mr. Wright.
Once again, Flint Wright for the record. This falls under number 3, NAC 571.355, vaccination of female cattle or bison before change of ownership. This is actually seen as an addition to the NAC, not necessarily change, but they're basically the same thing. You have to go to workshop and hearing. But essentially, we have kind of a loophole in this current reg in our state, which allows producers and or sale barns or marketeers of any sort to sell livestock in the state of Nevada that are not bangs vaccinated, as long as they go to an approved feed yard or maybe possibly even a state that doesn't actually care about our brucellosis regs. This loophole causes us some problems out there in our actual enforcement, okay? Basically, we don't have enough control on how those cattle are handled and how their ownership is transferred. And it's very possible, and it has happened, where some of these cattle don't necessarily go to a approved feed yard or to a state that has no regs on brucellosis. And they end up staying here in the state of Nevada. For the most part, the rule has always applied just to breeding age cattle, meaning that they had to be vaccinated, calf foot vaccinated, if they're under 12 months. What our issue really is that this age of the calf that's being sold at our sale barns and elsewhere and throughout the state of Nevada. Okay, many of those go on to become productive mothers, and if the point of sale is a sale barn, that may be the only chance we ever get to see that animal, and the only chance we could require it to be brucellosis vaccinated. And so that's the whole point of this addition and change to NAC. That I'll open up to any questions.
Yeah, Paul. Paul, no, for the record. Is 4 months of age then the minimum age that cattle are sold at the markets, or can they be sold younger than that?
It's the minimum age that they can be vaccinated.
Right.
Minimum age they can be vaccinated.
Yeah, that's not the minimum age they can be sold, but it's minimum age we could have them vaccinated. So by the drug's own precautions, that's the best you could ask for.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to go to workshop.
So moved.
Mr. No made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Morrison. Any discussion? Public comment? All of those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimous. Item D, permission to go to hearing and workshop for licensed veterinarians present on site at livestock markets. Mr. Wright.
Mic went off. Once again, Flint Wright for the record. This is a addition to 573.060, a veterinary presence at livestock markets on sale day. Once again, this addition, but also once again a change, therefore requiring workshop and meeting. Ultimately, we're not receiving enough veterinary care at our sale barns in the state of Nevada. I should say we're getting about 50% compliance. I'm not going to name names, but we show up to one facility on a regular basis every week, and we never can find a veterinarian. This is kind of my spiel and my shtick. I said it at Cattleman's, and Davey and Boyd, you heard it. I've been to just about every sale barn west of the Mississippi, some of them east, and this is the only state I've ever been to where you could not find a veterinarian at the sale barn that day. Dr. Michael Greenlee is, his issue with this is that that's a place where we need a veterinarian to identify possible disease situations in the state, whether they be brucellosis or otherwise, or trick for that matter. And we're just not getting enough compliance out of those, and so this would make it mandatory for the veterinarian to be present for at least 2 hours to assess all animal health status on sale day. And the penalty of this would be fines levied against the sale barn, and it could result into the loss of the potential sale day. So,
just for the record, everybody, I just want everybody to know that we are lucky to have representing the industry two very qualified veterinarians. I want everybody to know that in the course of this or any other discussion since I've been around, have I ever heard any kind of an idea pushed by these veterinarians that would by any chance benefit them somehow. This came up at the Cattlemen's Association meeting by a non-veterinarian person. These two veterinarians I'm talking about, Boyd one, Mr. Gokachia the other, do not have a stake in this anyways. This affects mainly Churchill County, the Fallon area. There are veterinarians in that area that can cover this, but Flynn is right. We have one such sale yard that has a scheduling problem. The other one, that veterinarian that he has, is there before the sale starts and usually is there when the sale's over. That's what we're looking for. And if you look at the previous two items, we do not have the staff, nor can we afford the staff to cover these. This is required by the veterinarian that's listed with that sale yard. They have to keep an eye on bangs and this trick stuff, and we have to rely on them and their accreditation that they do it properly. And that's, we're just losing, we just feel we're losing through our fingers. There might be animals that are slipping through the cracks. So I just wanted to bring that up, that this is an important one too. And I think if I heard right at the Cattlemen's meeting at the bull sale, we are probably one of the, if not the only state that doesn't require this, if I heard correctly. Yeah. We've never required this, but other states do. Jim?
Just one additional comment that I heard while at the same meeting. I think the industry's expectation is that those costs would obviously be passed through that sale yard to the industry itself, those producers that are selling there at that sale yard, and that additional expense is seen as necessary by the industry. In other words, they're not asking the sale yard to take this additional cost and burden on.
No.
They recognize that that'll obviously be passed to the industry, and the industry feels that's still worthy for the protections that it provides the industry itself. I think that was an important note that I also heard.
And that's been that way, Jim, for umpteen years, everything, including brand. Exactly. The sale barn, yeah, no, good point, but as long as that's been done, that will continue to be done. Yes, Flint.
And I just wanted to be on the record, Davey. To my knowledge, we are the only state that does not require this.
Okay. Mr. Anderson.
I do have a question. So you're referencing NRS 573 and 638. So in NRS right now, it's not required to have a veterinarian present. Is that correct, or are we just changing NAC to match NRS?
I'm gonna have to go back and look at that, but I do believe it requires the presence of a veterinarian. It does not define it as far as the hours. It does not define it as anywhere showing the failure of this or anything like that. It does require, I believe, the presence, but I'm gonna have to go back and look at that.
Mr. Dufferino, while they're looking?
Does the veterinarian for the sale yard, do they turn in a report or anything? Yes, or are they supposed to?
They would only be required to turn in a report if there was some issue or problem that they found there. Currently, it's not like a weekly status report or anything like that. So.
Other than Tim, the obvious thing would be if they issue a certificate, which is done quite a bit, especially cattle leaving the state.
Yeah, we get all their OCVs, which is the veterinary health inspection, so that would be as much as a weekly status report we would get.
Mr. Spratling.
The only concern I have, and I can see why it has to be there, the 2 hours gives you something that you can concretely say, you've been here an adequate amount of time to see the cattle coming in. The accredited veterinarian means, you've been accredited by the feds to conduct disease control measures that they've lined out, that they've set out for us. They set the standards for an accredited veterinarian besides being licensed in the state. And so even though the veterinarian's fees, his remuneration will come through the sale yard itself. His check will be cut by the sale yard. The sale yard will collect fees for a vaccination or for a bleeding or a TB test or whatever happens to need to be done. Currently, on the operations that do not have a veterinarian on premises, we're depending, the public and the industry is depending on the sale yard operator to comply with disease regulations. And that's the importance of having a veterinarian at least some point during the day on the premises to watch the cattle coming through, what is in compliance, what's not in compliance, whether they go out of state or stay within the state. So I can see why you have the 2 hours. I mean, it kind of rubs me that we shouldn't have to be that detailed, but I can understand it gives you a benchmark to say you're either complying or you're not complying with having someone on premises. So other than that, an explanation, that's all I have to say. I think it's something that needs to be done as a regulation change.
I also, go ahead, Jim.
Just for clarification on Board Member Anderson's question, there is no NAC 573.060. They created that as a reference number that would be proposed as the last reference number in that section of NAC is 573.050. And I think what they're referencing in 638 and 573.01 is the authority to create that regulatory piece. So this would be completely new NAC.
The only thing that I would add before we move on to Mr. No is be prepared during hearings. Well, let me make two things. First of all, I'm sure you will. Please notify both sale yards of the hearings. And be prepared on this time thing. In the last several weeks, other than a special, there probably will be an instance where you don't need a person there. It would take 2 hours. Probably half hour, the amount of cattle. If they go through and they all got tags in their ears, that could happen. All the heifers have tags. So just that may come up in the hearing, that requiring 2 hours flat may, at certain times. On a special day, they're probably going to need every bit of that. Okay. Mr. No?
Actually, you just answered my question.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion. Ms. Morrison?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Morrison, the motion, the second, Mr. Spratling. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all of those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimous.
We're hearing from Pete up there
Pete?
on his votes.
Oh.
Paris.
Pete, how are you doing, Pete?
I'm doing good. I'm just listening away.
Okay, you know, we got you down on a vote on all of these past votes, so I hope you're good.
Well, I raised my hand every time to say yes.
All right, well, glad to see you're there still. All right, moving on, it looks like board member presentations. The only thing we have is there some oaths to be administered, or Mr. Anderson's? All right. Dennis, you're on.
Member Anderson, Dennis Belcourt, Deputy Attorney General, please repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support, protect, and defend. Protect and defend. The Constitution. The Constitution and government of the United States. And the Constitution and government of the state of Nevada. Against all enemies, whether domestic or foreign. And that I will bear true faith, allegiance and loyalty to the same. Any ordinance, resolution, or law of any state notwithstanding. And that I will well and faithfully perform all the duties of the office of board member of the State Board of Agriculture, on which I am about to enter. So help me God. Thank you.
Okay, we got that taken care of. Glad to have you along again, Mr. Anderson. Public comment. Anybody have any public comment? Mr. Barbie?
Just when we go to lunch after this, we don't have a reservation, so we'll pick some place that has a lot of different restaurants. You can go to any restaurant you would prefer, or we can all go into one and just sit on multiple tables. After that, we'll do a tour of the legislature, and I believe when Jury sent out the information, she gave you the opportunity to set up appointments. So if you have to leave that tour to go to an appointment or anything else, feel free to. We want to give you that opportunity. But as we're having lunch and as we're working through the day, I would like any feedback you might have on how we've done this meeting this time around, hosting one during the legislative session in Carson City, if that's something that you would want us to repeat in the future as we prepare for other board meetings and other sessions down the road. Just kind of give us some feedback on what you think of how we're doing on this particular meeting. Thanks.
Jim asked me before we left today, do you guys want to take a quick minute? Is everybody cool with this idea of coming here today?
Yes.
It's a great idea, nice meeting spot, good time to do it. I don't know, in the off season next year, we'll probably go back to Reno, but we'll be back in Reno, right, in June, and then we go back on the road? And then I'll go in September and Las Vegas in December. Okay, and those dates have all been set. We've said this again. The places are all been picked. Lunches have all been ordered. Sandwiches, yeah. Okay. The only thing I wanted to talk to you folks about is, real quick, since we're right off the heels of the All Breeds Bull Sale in Fallon, it was probably one of the most successful bull sales we've had since we've been doing it. The numbers were down significantly. We ended up selling 71 bulls. Normally we get at least 100. At one time we were up to 130 bulls, 140 bulls. It was a wonderful sale. Here's what made it so good, is the bulls averaged $5,770 a piece. Yeah, when they do the sifting of the bulls, when they go through and grade them, they do them all in order of who graded the highest. So the Grand Champion bull goes first, and the Grand Champion bull brought $1,000 less than bulls farther down the list because everybody was waiting to see what the price of them were. They knew from Red Bluff that they were going to be expensive. Red Bluff's numbers were down too, but everybody sat to see what the market was going to be, and by the time they got to the best bull of the whole sale, he was $1,000 higher. We also saw the market trending to Cavanese bulls. Those are bulls that you breed your heifers to get a smaller calf so you don't have troubles with that first calf being born. So that's a sign that everybody's trying to get as many heifers with babies on the ground to get their numbers back. It looks like to us, the market, from everything I'm hearing, that the market is going to be strong for these lighter calves. It did weaken on the feeder cattle a little bit, but it's coming back. We had some export issues that caused that market to fall back for a little bit. But it seems like these export things come and then they go, kind of like fuel prices. They come all of a sudden and then, you know, what have you. So looks like we're going to have another good year, and who knows where feed prices are. It's all over the place. So, and the water thing, I'm not going to go into that because we need to have a positive day on precipitation. So if there's no more reports or anything on public comment, I'll go to item 12, adjournment. Entertain a motion.
I so move.
Second? Second. Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.